Hi guys, welcome to Bible Breakdown. We're doing Acts chapter 25. Yeah, we're back. Okay. So since I've been gone for a while, if you're new here, I do this thing where I break down books in the Bible by chapter and I post it for you guys, give you guys my understanding, give a summary, give a breakdown. Last time I was here, we did the book of Acts and I left off on chapter 24. So if you need a recap, please go back, watch those videos, catch up, and then come back. So to start out, I will be reading a summary of this chapter and then doing the breakdown. So for the summary, I wrote, Festus arrived, then after 3 days they traveled to Jerusalem. Festus was informed on Paul's case and was requested by the Jews to summon Paul to Jerusalem to be trialed. This was requested so that they can fulfill their plan of killing Paul. Festus disagreed and mentioned he'll be back in Caesarea and told the ones with authority to go with him to accuse Paul if he had done anything wrong. No more than 10 days passed of Festus being among those people, then they went back to Caesarea. The following day, the Jews that went on the trip with Festus went before him and Paul to present their charges. Paul argues that what he has done is doing no wrong. Festus brings up the idea of traveling to Jerusalem for the trial, but Paul firmly declines, knowing the Jews despise him, which would lead to his death. Instead, he'd rather go before Caesar in Rome. Festus allowed this decision. Now days have passed, and King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea. Festus filled them in on the situation with Paul, since they'll be there for some time. After hearing the trial, King Agrippa insisted on hearing Paul for himself. This led them all to be together the next day for Paul to defend his case. This was also done because Festus was wanting more guidance on what to write to the emperor based on what Paul has done, since Festus believed he did no wrong. So summarizing the summary, basically, Paul's going on trial again. They keep pulling Paul on trial, and I'm just like, what is going on? Festus believes that Paul didn't do anything wrong, which is why he lets King Agrippa kind of put Paul on trial again, because he's trying to see like what he can present to the emperor. Is this making sense? Like, Festus thinks that Paul should be free. Festus doesn't think that Paul should be on trial. But now let's get into the breakdown. The start of this chapter is titled Appeal to Caesar. For verses 1 to 12, I wrote, if he did it before, he can do it again. Sometimes the devil may think that he has the upper hand in a situation, but this is a reminder that God will go ahead of you. And relating this to Paul, God makes sure that the protection that he put over Paul did not stop at Felix. So backtracking, if you're new here, Felix was the king that was ruling when Paul was originally on trial. After some time, Felix steps down, Festus comes in. So Felix was protecting Paul a lot in the chapters before. And like a big example of that is when the crowd started getting crazy and was basically about to tear Paul to shreds. Felix stepped in and made sure that he was pulled away to safety. And there was just so many other instances that Felix was just like in the right place at the right time. I point that out because Felix is gone, like I said, but Festus is in, and I want to highlight verses 4 and 5. So for verses 4 and 5, it says, Festus, however, answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea and that he himself was about to go there shortly. Therefore, he said, let those of you who have authority go down with me and accuse him if he has done anything wrong. This is protection from God because Festus has the authority to just let the Jews do whatever they want to Paul. He has to say so. He can say yes or he can say no, but he chose to have those people travel and accuse Paul rightfully if they think that he deserves it. Obviously, we know that Paul is doing nothing wrong. Festus, like I said earlier, is on Paul's side. The next section is titled King Agrippa and Bernice Visits Festus. This is for verses 13 to 22, and I want to highlight verses 18 and 19. But before I read those, I said that it brings me to the thoughts of being bold in your faith. Paul did not conform to what the people around him told him to do or what they wanted him to do. I also wrote that we can learn from Paul by striving to live a life guided by the Lord. After Paul had that encounter, his obedience to the Lord's command sustained him through this journey. So verses 18 and 19 say, "The accusers stood up but brought no charges against him of the evils I was expecting. Instead, they had some disagreements with him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus, a dead man Paul claims to be alive." I'm not gonna lie, I've read this chapter many times before making this video and making this breakdown, and I feel like every time I read it, it just shows how bold Paul is in his faith and how we can be like him. There was not a time in this whole trial where Paul switched up and changed his views about Jesus just based off of the crowd that he was presented in front of. I feel like sometimes we like to hide our faith or like mask ourselves due to like the people that are watching, but Jesus is above all. Why do we care about what other people think? At this point, I'm in a point of my journey where if it makes me look crazy and if it makes me look out of my mind for following the Lord and doing what I need to do, then so be it. That's just what it's going to have to be. I'd rather be obedient in the Lord and try to bring as many souls to the Father as I can than to sugarcoat what I'm called to do and to sugarcoat the gospel and the truth of the word. I love that last line that I wrote when I said, "His obedience to the Lord's command sustained him through his journey." I feel like listening to the Lord and just following his instruction will get you through no matter what. It doesn't matter what the road looks like. It doesn't matter how hard it might be. The Lord got you. And now the last section of this chapter is Paul before Agrippa. So in this section, this is when Festus is talking to King Agrippa and he's like, "I'm presenting Paul in front of you. Please help me basically figure out what I should write to the emperor about the charges against Paul because I have nothing." So it seems like there's a lot of confusion and uncertainty here. And for this section, I wrote, "You may be in situations that may not make sense now, but it will serve its purpose." Me personally, reading these trial chapters for Acts, I caught myself asking why a lot of times. I can relate to Festus in verses 26 and 27. To that, I encourage you all to keep the faith and never lose hope. I'll put the verses here on the screen because I'm running out of time, but those verses basically highlight the uncertainty that Festus has. And I feel like that represents some of the seasons that we're in. Like sometimes you're just walking by faith and you don't even know what the purpose of what's happening right now is. But what I'm doing today can affect what happens to me in 5 years from now, and I never know. So like I said, I hope you guys keep the faith and never lose hope. But with that being said, that is all I have for you guys. That is the end of this chapter, and I will see you in the next video for chapter 26. I love y'all. God loves y'all more. Have a great night.